Good afternoon. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Opposition candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu was officially declared Istanbul's new mayor on Wednesday, despite a pending appeal from the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, to invalidate the vote in Istanbul and hold a rerun.
The election board in Istanbul confirmed that Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayoral candidate of the main opposition Republican People's Party (CHP), was elected mayor in the municipal race on March 31st. İmamoğlu was awarded his formal mandate to become mayor of Istanbul at the Çağlayan Courthouse, where the Istanbul Election Council is located. A handover ceremony between İmamoğlu and the outgoing mayor Mevlüt Uysal took place later at the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. Speaking to reporters at the municipality building, İmamoğlu said, "I've received this formal certificate on behalf of the 16 million people of Istanbul. We never gave up. We never gave up on our battle for democracy and rights," İmamoğlu said in his remarks to supporters at the municipality building. In his first speech after taking up his mandate, İmamoğlu referred to the ongoing legal battle over the results of Istanbul's municipal elections and said, "There are processes going on as of now. We're aware of this. Naturally, we await certain statements on these processes for the peace and happiness of our city and its residents." A formal request from the ruling Justice and Development Party AKP to invalidate the vote and hold a new election in Istanbul is still pending at the Supreme Election Board. Initial results show that İmamoğlu had won the race in Turkey's biggest city and economic hub by a small margin, ending 15 years of control by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's AKP. However, the AKP made several appeals for recounting, and on Tuesday, it lodged an extraordinary objection and asked for a rerun of elections across the city. The country's top electoral body has yet to consider the request. In the 16 days since the election, votes have been recounted in dozens of districts, multiple times in some of them. In a press conference earlier on Wednesday, Ali İhsan Yavuz, a deputy chairman of the AKP, claimed that there were systematic irregularities in the polls. "We have observed irregular and illegal actions in all 39 districts of Istanbul. We are saying that organized fraud, unlawfulness, and crimes were committed," he told reporters. Shortly after Yavuz's remarks, CHP Deputy Chairman Muharrem Erkek said that the AKP had no concrete documents, information, or evidence in its appeal for the annulment of the polls. "There is no legitimate reason at all," he said, adding that the move was damaging the will of the people of Istanbul.
Joining us in the studio today is Yüksel Taşkın, who is a professor of political science and a party assembly member at the main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP. Good afternoon, Professor Taşkın. Good to have you here once again. So as we've just heard in our previous news video, 17 days after the March 31st local elections, CHP's Istanbul candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu officially received his formal mandate to become the new mayor of Istanbul, although an appeal by the ruling AKP has been made to annul this vote in Istanbul. So despite this ongoing legal battle, I think it would be fair to say at this point that the election of İmamoğlu as the new mayor of Istanbul is striking in the sense that it marks the end of a 17-year AKP rule in the biggest economic hub of the country. Actually, we could put it as marking the end of a 25-year conservative rule if we take into account the Islamist predecessors of the AKP in Istanbul. So my first question to you is, do you think it would be appropriate to frame this as a breaking point in Turkish politics? What should we expect to see in Turkey's political scene from this point onwards?
Of course, it's a significant watershed because if we remember Recep Tayyip Erdogan's first significant political career, it was his unexpected victory in 1994 race for mayor in Istanbul. So his political career started there, and he's now currently, head of president of Turkey. So even when we look at the reactions coming from the ruling party, you can feel the significance of this victory. Why, despite they control all the state, unfortunately, we have a new system in which there is this congruence of state and actually party-state congruence. So under these conditions, of course, they control the state, they controlled the news agency known as Anatolian News Agency. So they controlled almost all media groups. They were able to subordinate all business groups in Turkey. So under these conditions, nobody can call these elections fair and free for us. Despite this, opposition was quite eager, energetic, dynamic, as we were during the referendum. And we are doing our best under these conditions because we have hope and we are quite justified in our cause to rebuild our democratic standards. In that regard, this is a watershed. Why? Because we were able to defeat a government with incredible powers. What does this mean? Under a slightly improved conditions, under a slightly improved, for example, plurality in media, pluralism in media, even a slightly fair election would be held. We will have a definite victory. In addition to this, we won in almost all significant metropolitan mayorships, from Istanbul to Izmir, Ankara, Adana, Mersin, Hatay, Antalya. What does this mean? People may underestimate this important fact by saying that these are just metropolitan mayors of the West. But we shouldn't forget that almost 85% of the people are living in the West in Turkey. So this means we have now an incredible advantage to introduce here fair social policies, a political line without corruption, an open democratic process, so that would bring us finally to power, national power after national elections. We are, for example, after the elections, our optimism has incredibly multiplied. And you can feel ruling parties' disappointment. They feel a bit disappointed. They cannot accept the truth because they have just entered into an era of post-truth. So that was also a good shock for them. We don't know whether they would get the lesson to start a reform, to start a how to say self-criticism. So related to your question, ruling party has two options right now. One, some sort of self-criticism and softening their position. Second, which is more likely to continue like this. If they continue like this society will definitely produce an alternative to them, as these election results definitely proved us.
So you've said that the ruling party is faced with two options right now, one of them being self-criticism and the other one being continuing as things are. So let's try to focus on the next action by the ruling party right now. As we've just heard in the video and as both you and I have mentioned, there's a pending appeal right now by the AKP to invalidate this vote and hold a rerun for Istanbul, for the race in Istanbul. So what do you think will happen in case the Supreme Board of Elections actually decides to annul this vote and repeat the elections in Istanbul? What sort of a meaning or consequence, let's say, would this have for Turkish democracy or the democratic processes in the country, let's say?
It would be definitely a litmus test for our democracy or whatever left from our democracy. Scholars label Turkey as a kind of competitive authoritarian regime. So competitive and authoritarian. If a Supreme Election Board, rejects a ruling party's appeal, this means a competitive nature of our system would be empowered. If they accept this, let's say, strange appeal that would empower authoritarian nature of the regime. This is beyond Ekrem İmamoğlu's mayorship, actually. This is about the fate of our democracy or whatever left from our democracy. If people's some sort of belief to democratic procedures are still there, that would empower Turkey and everybody should be happy about this. So what we have experienced are quite critical days for Turkey. But today I am more optimistic than yesterday. I'm generally an optimistic person, but after Ekrem İmamoğlu was given the official mandate to rule Istanbul, after he started the process, believe me, his power, the energy he created, the confidence he got from the Istanbul people, ordinary people from all walks of the life, is there empowering our case. So I don't expect any contrary decision to the will of the Istanbul's people. It is a declining, possibility, but that would be such a madness would have detrimental effect to our democratic traditions. People from all the parties, from AKP, from Republican People's Party, should believe that elections matter. This is good for the majority of the people. This is good for the all Turkish people without their political leaning. So I hope that we will overcome this let's say hindrance with fair legal decisions, so that Ekrem İmamoğlu can keep his promises to the people who just willingly voted for him.
So the main focus of this week's program is Istanbul, obviously,
yes.
but Istanbul is only one of the three major provinces in Turkey which were won by the opposition, by the CHP on March 31st. Actually, it's followed by Ankara and Izmir. That is, they're also joined by Antalya, Mersin, and Adana, which were taken from the AKP and the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP. And this seems to be an unprecedented success for the CHP, for the main opposition, given its track record in the previous local elections, or any election for that matter. So how do you explain this unexpected success by
Actually,
the CHP?
before 1980s, almost all significant mayorships were won by the Republican People's Party. After 1980s, in 1989, we also made incredible gains in the local elections. We won all these three major cities, including others you mentioned. But today's is important. Why? It shows that, first, majority of the people have adjusted themselves to the new game of 50% plus one vote. People want change, actually. People do not want a ruling party to further, make Turkey leading towards authoritarianism. That's why people want to have an option. In that regard, there was a political void. And the Republican People's Party, I believe, successfully orchestrated the coalition building process in a very rapid manner. So why? Because we are more democratic than the rest of the parties. We are more, for example, in our party assembly meetings, which may last for about 20 hours, we discuss and discuss. Sometimes we disagree with the leader of party. Sometimes we agree with him. So all these deliberative processes would create, considerably better decisions compared with the other opposition. So coalition building skills of this party, made it a leading, orchestrating force. So that's why, especially metropolitan areas of Turkey, who cannot be ruled by an authoritarian mentality, clearly showed their disapproval of the ruling party, and clearly they are showing also an alternative power center around Republican People's Party. We have the lesson. We will do our best to actually, satisfy this impending need for another alternative ruling bloc in Turkey.
Mm-hmm. And Professor Taşkın, let's conclude with your evaluation on Istanbul in particular. Let's shift back our focus on Istanbul. Again, how would you evaluate as someone from within the party, how would you evaluate the campaign period of Ekrem İmamoğlu, not of the CHP, but of İmamoğlu in particular? What led him to this historical success, in your opinion?
At the very beginning, as part of the JHP Istanbul branch local elections table, we organized certain polls. We asked about several candidates. So Ekrem İmamoğlu actually was very, very lucky, because so many people just expressed their willingness to vote for him. he was not somebody with certain negativity. He was not attached negativity. So from that point onwards, Ekrem İmamoğlu decided to build a local agenda, focusing on problem solving rather than paying attention to any sort of polarization. So our rivals were playing the card of national security, despite we just have some sort of local elections, routine local elections. So Ekrem İmamoğlu, he was successfully able to introduce a local agenda for Istanbul. Many people believed that, even from people from the ruling party or voted for ruling party, they believed that this guy can rule Istanbul better than the other candidates. Secondly, his campaign was quite inclusive. Actually, this is what we need in Turkey. He actually introduced the right sort of politics against this polarization that people actually want to get rid of. So here, the promise he made, I will bring peace to Istanbul. It is the motto, summarizing slogan of this election campaign. It is an incredible, observation. People of Istanbul need this sort of peace. We need to overcome polarization and to be able to live together, plus to be able to overcome economic crisis that we are now in the middle of. So he introduced right campaign, and as I said, politics won't tolerate any void. So our rivals, just were repeating this, let's say, alienating discourse of danger of national security, blah, blah, blah, but nobody about it because they were suffering from economic crisis and they wanted to see some sort of new heroes from a new generation because they fed up with the old one, repetitively, trying to frighten us. Instead of fear, they voted for hope, which is quite normal and optimistic for our future as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Taşkın, for being with us in the studio today. This week, we were joined by Yüksel Taşkın, who commented on the new era in Turkish politics after the election of Ekrem İmamoğlu as Istanbul mayor, and now we'll continue with our next news video. Financial Times reported yesterday that Turkey's central bank was using money borrowed from commercial banks in short-term swaps to inflate its foreign currency reserve figures. Following the report, the Turkish lira weakened by nearly 2% against the dollar.
Speaking in reference to the Financial Times report, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said, "The Turkish economy is standing strong and that Turkey is being attacked because it's speaking out against injustices, including those against refugees." Oh, Financial Times, what do you know about Turkey, which hosts 4 million refugees? How many refugees are there in your country? Erdogan said. Meanwhile, Treasury and Finance Minister Berat Albayrak held talks with international investors and managers of large funds on the sidelines of the International Monetary Fund World Bank Spring meeting held last week in Washington. The meetings were very fruitful. The main topic was a reform package that Albayrak announced last week. Investors showed great interest in the package. They wanted to learn more details about the package. Hürriyet Daily News reported the officials from the Treasury Ministry as saying, the minister also held a meeting with investors at an event organized by JP Morgan, where he made a presentation covering issues such as the targets set in the new economic program, the reform package, and the debt structure of Turkey. At this meeting, Albayrak reiterated that Turkey does not need the IMF's support. While in Washington, Albayrak also held meetings with state officials and counterparts from several countries, including US President Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Albayrak and Mnuchin reportedly discussed measures aimed at increasing bilateral trade. The governor of the Turkish Central Bank, Murat Çetinkaya, also made a presentation at the IMF World Bank meeting in Washington. Çetinkaya noted that the rebalancing trend in the Turkish economy has become more noticeable and the current account balance is expected to maintain its improving outlook. Çetinkaya reiterated that the central bank will continue to use all available instruments to achieve price stability. Meanwhile, Turkey's central government budget balance posted a deficit of 36.2 billion Turkish liras in the first quarter of 2019, the Treasury and Finance Ministry announced Monday. Turkey's budget revenues soared by 30.4% year-on-year to hit 218 billion liras in the January-March period of 2019. The country's budget expenditures reached 254 billion liras in the first quarter, increasing 35.44% compared with the same period of last year, according to the official data. Furthermore, the unemployment rate in Turkey was 14.7% in January 2019. The Turkish Statistical Institute, TürkSat, announced on Monday. TürkStat also announced Tuesday that Turkey's industrial production in February rose by 1.3% from a month earlier. Posting a 5.5% annual decline, the manufacturing index performed worse among three main sub-indices. The mining and quarrying index followed it with a 4.7% decline.
Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif visited Ankara on Wednesday to hold talks with Turkish government officials. Prior to his visit to Turkey, Zarif traveled to Damascus on Tuesday to meet Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad.
Following his visit, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif announced that Iran and Turkey have agreed to set up a mechanism similar to the European Union's mechanism to cooperate with Tehran away from US sanctions. We agreed on Wednesday during my visit to Turkey with our Turkish brothers to find a financial mechanism between Tehran and Ankara, similar to the financial mechanism between us and Europe, Zarif told Iranian television on Thursday. We also agreed on trade exchange in local currency, and we have been seriously prepared with Turkey to cooperate with Iran in the political, regional, and international fields, he added. Earlier this week, Turkey voiced hope that the United States will extend an exemption in sanctions to allow it to keep buying oil from Iran. The United States has given 6-month exemptions to Turkey and 7 other nations that run out on May 2nd. Turkish President Erdogan received Zarif in Ankara on Wednesday, a day after Javad Zarif's meeting with Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. Zarif said earlier in a joint news conference following bilateral talks with his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Çavuşoğlu that he would submit a report to President Erdogan about his long meeting with Assad. No information was provided after the Erdogan-Zarif meeting, however. In the joint news conference with Zarif, Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu said that Turkey would continue to explain to the US that sanctions targeting Iran are wrong. He also criticized the US decision to put Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps on its terror list. Zarif's meeting came the week before a meeting between Iran, Turkey, and Russia in Kazakhstan. Moscow, Ankara, and Tehran are the sponsors of the Astana Initiative, which seeks to find a political solution to the Syrian civil war.
Turkey's top officials were in Washington this week, aiming to defuse the mounting tensions with the US government regarding Turkey's purchase of the Russian S-400 air defense systems.
Ankara expects US President Donald Trump to use a waiver to protect Turkey if the US Congress decides to sanction it over the planned purchase of the Russian S-400 missile defense systems. Turkish presidential spokesman Ibrahim Kalın said. Speaking to reporters in Washington, Kalın said Ankara hoped the solution would be found to avoid sanctions. We will expect President Trump to use his power for a waiver on that issue, Kalın said. Kalın's remarks came after Berat Albayrak, Turkey's finance minister and President Erdogan's son-in-law, met with Trump. He listened in a very reasonable way with a positive understanding to the process regarding Turkey's needs for the S-400s, Albayrak said. Turkey has not backed down from its purchase, and the US has called Turkey's planned purchase of S-400s deeply problematic, saying it would risk Ankara's partnership in the Joint Strike Fighter F-35 program. The US fears the radar on the Russian S-400 missile system will learn how to spot F-35s and track the jet, making it less able to evade Russian weapons. The disagreement is the latest in a series of diplomatic disputes between the United States and Turkey. They include Turkish demands for Washington to extradite Fethullah Gülen, differences over Middle East policy and the war in Syria, and sanctions on Iran.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 5 p.m. Goodbye.